We have a full panel today with everyone here. Do I hear a motion for the approval of the July 20th, 2017 minutes?
So moved.
Okay, and a second? Second. All in favor? Any opposition? Thank you. Number 2 item on our agenda for the New Birth Temple of Deliverance has been postponed. So if anyone is here for that case, just wanted to let you know that that had been postponed until next month.
My name's Kevin Nesbitt. I will be here next month for
Okay.
some of the neighbors.
Okay.
So I just wanted to let you all know.
Yeah, I just want, if anybody was here for that, I didn't want them to have to stay if they wasn't interested. So, we have a request from Tim Dalzell for a variance on a property located at 4925 Houstonville Road. The property is zoned agricultural residential AR1. Before we start, Steve, I think Steve has something first.
Okay.
Thank you. Steve Hunter, Director here at the Planning Commission. I think Nancy's ready to roll here this morning. So
She's ready.
Just do a quick little lead in, tell y'all what we're doing here. You got a variance request in front of you guys for basically a barn that's going behind the building. There's an existing structure already on the drawing that you guys can see that's going to be removed. A smaller building, and they're basically going to build a 2,000 square foot pole barn. Reason we're here about the variance and the purpose you can see is on your exhibit that Nancy did. This property has dual frontages, and there's a 50-foot setback, front setback that gets adhered to both frontages because we have 2 roadways. This is an accessory building. Typically, an accessory building would have an 8-foot setback from an edge of the property. But again, because this has 2 road frontages, there are 2 50-foot setbacks that have to be adhered to. The applicant's asking you to vary that. Basically appears to be a side setback, but technically it's a front setback along York. And to build a pole barn, again, take an old building down and put a newer barn up on the property. And I'll let Nancy, or if you guys have any questions for me about the request.
Not at this time, anyway.
Not at this time.
Thank you, guys.
Nancy?
Hello, folks.
Nancy, you know the drill.
Yes,
Do
ma'am.
you swear or affirm the statement you're about to make are true and correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And state your name.
My name is Nancy with Estes Engineering and Surveying here in Danville.
Okay.
The reason we're asking for the variance, like he said, we're asking for it to be 15 feet. The area to the south of the building that we want to put up contains his septic system. And there, from what I understand, there are 2 tanks on this property. One is for gray water, one is for sewage, and it's virtually impossible to move it any further south. So we would like to move the 50-foot setback to 15 feet. York Street is not a street that is heavily traveled in Junction City.
Any questions for Nancy?
Not right now.
I don't think there's any, you're not going to have any signage or anything like that to
No,
deal
ma'am.
with. It's
No, ma'am.
just a simple farm barn, am I right?
He wants to put some of his equipment in it.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Is there an entrance off of York Lane onto the property?
No, there's not.
No. It'll come around the house into the back.
Do we know, is there opposition among the neighbors?
They have all been contacted by planning and zoning.
And I will check to make sure that no one's here
Okay.
in opposition. Any questions? Is there anyone else here who would like to speak to this? Seeing none, do I hear a motion?
I move approval.
Should I recuse?
You can if you want to.
I think I'm going to recuse myself from this vote.
Okay.
Okay, you have a motion for approval.
Okay.
Just granting the setbacks as it would not be adverse to the public health and welfare, right? Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Thank you.
Thank you very much, folks.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Nancy.
it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, over here, Madam Chairman, if you'll recall, we closed the record last time for findings on this matter, but as there's being new evidence introduced in the record, we can reopen.
Okay.
Thank you, Sharon.
Well, I lost them somewhere in all these papers.
Thank you. I think it's the same except
In old business, we have Greer Land Company has applied for a variance on a property located 2596 South Danville Bypass. The property is zoned highway commercial, and this was continuance from our last meeting, and we'll let Mr. Hunter get us started.
Thank you, Chairman. This is interesting for me, kind of coming to this at the tail end. I understand you guys have had a couple meetings, one withdrawn and tabled. And I had a little bit of an opportunity during one of my orientation days before the former director left to actually sit in the room with her, talk personally with the gas company for about some particulars, I think before your prior hearing. And then since then, first day on the job or so, reviewed the case file, talked with our attorney, and then met with the actual client, met with the applicant, Vision Engineering, their attorney, Ms. Nebs here, and then the actual property owner, Greer Land Company, met with Mr. Greer too, just to make sure I understood what all was going on, what his desire was here on this property. And then I've been talking with the gas company, in fact, they wanted me to bring my phone in here in case they wanted to text me something, but I told them I wasn't gonna bring my phone in. But talked to them this morning too. So I've got a lot of facts here thrown at me pretty fast, but we'll just keep this fairly easy. What we've got is a variance request for what appears to be a building here on the corner property that you see on the Danville Bypass 127. And what, as you all know, has dual gas lines on it with easement requirements, front and back. The other part that's interesting is we have a provision in our zoning ordinance, in Article 5, that's 5.1.11, that appears to require an additional setback to a high-pressure gas line of 25 feet. So when I first was studying up the case and looking at it and memorizing whatever, that was odd to me. I've never seen an additional setback of any kind to any kind of easement, whether it be gas, water, electric, sewer, whatever. I've never seen an additional setback to an easement with, in my 20 years experience. I also asked the gas company, had they ever seen a standard like this? And they work in Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. They had never seen an additional setback requirement. It appears it's in our ordinance in the city of Danville. It's very unique to the city of Danville. There's hardly any city in Kentucky that has the same standard. What most cities have is an easement width, 50, 20, 60, 80, 100. I can tell you what I'm used to seeing for gas lines, electric lines, fiber lines, whatever. What we actually have here are two gas lines with an easement width that may be an older width, may be not a desired width for the gas company, but it's not maybe an industry standard that we typically see. So what we have here tonight is a variance request to get into these two 25-foot setbacks adjacent to these easements. But what I can tell you with 100% certainty right here is that everywhere in the United States, we put buildings up to the edge of easements. We put parking on easements, and we do landscaping and signage in a hybrid fashion to deal with easements. So that's not unique here or unique anywhere. We build up to easements every day. Unfortunately, in Danville, when we have a gas line, we get an additional standard. We don't do that for fiber, water, or sewer, or electric. It just appears in our ordinance, it's just for gas lines. So that's different to me. We looked in the minutes, we looked in the ordinance when it was created, we can't find any definitive language on why it went into place, it's just in our book. So we treat gas lines different, we treat phase 3 electric lines, it appears, in our town, and so that's what it is. Most cities would have easement widths or desired easement widths in their subdivision regulations. I can tell you, most of the time I've worked around gas lines in my prior job, I saw gas line easement widths 50 to 75 feet typically. But then I saw electric line widths of 100 feet sometimes. And then in old parts of town, they were 20 and 30 and 50 and 80. And then we would try to get them right when we platted new properties around the fringe of town. So this is a very unique corner, it appears, and what the applicant has done since the last meeting is brought you a new exhibit. They've actually agreed to some conditions, and on that drawing that's black and white, it's going to be hard to see, but at the top you see something that says applicant notes. And they've made some conditions that are unique from last time. They've also given you a color exhibit to help you visualize how this property is going to develop out, show you where the gas line setback is with the 25, and the actual easement on this drawing is shown in yellow. So you can clearly see where the gas line easement is and the relationship of the building, parking, landscape, etc. There's even some cars on there. I can't tell what make and model those are, but they look to scale to me, I'll just tell you that much. So, another thing I thought was interesting, again, talking about easements. Wasn't here at the last meeting, but read the minutes. Appears a lot of this discussion was in relationship to these gas lines and how they function, and possibly starting to dabble down the road of safety or concern. But what I know about easements, just historically, is an easement is a footprint to give a gas company, electric company, water company the ability to get on a piece of property and maintain their infrastructure. So just so we all understand, these easements are actually part of a property owned by the client. The easements are there to give that infrastructure holder the ability to get on there and dig or move or replace or whatever. So typically that's what the easement widths are about on how you get equipment. For example, fiber along I-65 has some pretty big easements because they bring some different kind of equipment in when they excavate and put fiber in. So just want to make sure you guys understand what we're trying to do here is make sure that the easements are adhered to basically to the infrastructure owner's satisfaction. So again, in talking with the gas company, they're not here tonight or today. I think what they're concerned and what I think every easement, whether it be water or electric, is the integrity of their infrastructure, making sure that it stays where it needs to be and it's not touched or bothered or nicked with a dozer. So I think from my standpoint, what I think's interesting here, when I look at the yellow lines, now this is independent of the setbacks, I think it's important that whatever happens on this property, we do the best job we can to make sure we adhere to the integrity of that gas line. And what that says to me is, in the construction phase, is the most dangerous thing that can happen when you have a water line, fiber line, electric line, or gas line. Guys on dozers, guys on backhoes, when we're excavating or prepping the site, that's where it's real important that everyone understands where the lines are, where the easements are. And what I suggested to the gas company client was we may want to do something extra on this case, which is what a lot of folks do, which is establish temporary construction easements and encroachment permits so that when we're doing site grading, that the gas company's on site and everyone's working together if we're moving any dirt or concrete or paving. That's what's really important when we're adhering to easements. Now this additional 25 foot from the blue line to the yellow line, that's a City of Danville standard, and it basically says that that's a 25-foot additional setback, and buildings can't go there without your all's approval in the form of a variance. And what the applicant has done is, this looks different from last time. The one building's gone. It's still shown as future development on your actual technical drawing, but this time what the client indicated to me is what he's got is potentially a contract for this building. And I said I'd sure like to see the landscape and parking more graphically, because the landscaping impacts infrastructure integrity too. And show me that in a graphic, and that's what Vision has done. The other drawings, the technical drawing has the notes on it, and I asked them to consider any conditions they could put forward to basically make sure that we can get in that easement comfortably, and at the site prep, we're doing the best job we can to ensure the integrity of that infrastructure. So that's what the other exhibit shows you, and there are notes on that, I believe, that say applicant notes, if you can't see them. And they're also been put forward in their findings of fact, where they're basically committing to how they're gonna coordinate with the gas company as they site prep this, if the variance is successful. So that's kind of my 5 cents right there, and where I came in and where I've left it, and then the clients here, I guess, take it from there. But I'd be glad to answer any questions you guys might have, or Bruce, or anything you think I need to add, or at this point.
You're good.
I
Thank you,
did
sir.
have one. What did you say was the average setback for?
It's not setback.
Easement, I'm sorry.
Easement, well, I wouldn't
Average
call it
easement.
average, I'm just telling you
For
what I know.
those size gas lines?
I've seen them all kinds, it just depends where you're at in your towns. If this was new greenfield development in the area I came from, it'd have been 75 foot. But if it was in the city and it was already platted and there, I've seen them as narrow as 20 foot. That's why a lot of times at the construction phase, if you had to do a detailed development plan or a zone change, we would have asked for those additional temporary construction easements. I just worked with a truck stop with something similar to this. We had to get over a retaining wall. So what we want to do is we establish temporary easements that the gas company, in this case, would feel comfortable with, that when things are happening, we may have more than 25 feet. Or the staging of the project, or when we're pouring the footer in relationship to when we're paving or excavating the site. But I've seen them 75, but I've also seen 100-foot wide easements. Typically, they're for electric lines, Phase 3 TVA lines. I've seen the widest easements on a plat are typically 100 foot, and they're usually electric. And if they're buried, they're narrower, they're wider vertical, and they're 60 foot when they're underground. But I've seen all kinds on gas. It just depends where you're at in your town and what they were able to get plat by plat by plat back in the day.
When you say as little as 20 feet, are you talking about from the actual gas line or from the,
Width of the easement,
Width of
so
the
if the
easement.
pipe is
From
whatever
20
width,
foot
I've
from
seen
the
them as narrow as that, but that's in older sections of town. The gas line might have been right behind the sidewalk, right down the center of the street, every kind of thing. So I've seen every kind, but typically where we've set a standard in my past has been in subdivision regs, what we want to see from here forward, and as each plat comes in, what we're going to get. And that's usually greenfield development. Heading off to a new industrial park, we're platting something, we're going to get a wider easement. Fiber has typically been the widest for that big fiber that we've been putting on down I-65, but around residential areas, it drops down. But electric's the biggest I've ever seen.
you're saying that Danville is atypical than other towns, and that that they would start their setback from the line, the actual line, as much as 75 feet?
From what I'm seeing is we have a standard in our zoners that says that we have an additional 25-foot setback from the easement. So it's from the edge of that yellow line. So whatever that easement width would be, if it's 20, and we got 45. Had it been 100, it'd been 125. So our standard is going to vary based on, it's 25 from wherever that line goes as we move across the bypass. So our standard's a little odd to me, and again, I'm not aware of ever seeing an additional building setback along an easement. I've seen additional building setbacks adjacent to, commercial for residential, and, chicken barn from a house. But I've never seen a setback, additional setback from a utility easement, water, gas, electric, fiber, or sewer, in my experience.
When was, this ordinance was passed in 2004, am I right?
2004, and I checked the minutes and went back through. It wasn't in the prior ordinance, it's in this ordinance. It's one sentence, and we couldn't find any detailed information on how or why. There might be some summary notes somewhere when the ordinance was talked about in public setting, but there's no hard evidence I have. Our ordinance doesn't have footnotes in it. It'd be good if we had someday footnotes as we amend the ordinance, where we can go back and figure out what year, what topic, why type of thing. You just hide them in the footer, but we don't have those in this document digitally. So all I can tell you is section 5111 says that's what we do in Danville. And it says City of First on the tower, so it just may be that's what we do. It is odd. The gas company said they've never seen that. And again, they see buildings up to their easements all the time. And again, all over the country, we build buildings up to easements all over, and we do it in this city too. But gas is being treated different than water, sewer, electric, or fiber.
Any questions for him right now?
I had just two brief ones. First, am I right, as our current easement 30 feet? It's
It's hard
not
to
the
see,
s-
I don't have the new drawing in front of me.
Yes,
What-
Thirty.
Again, 50 on the other, and that's on that black and white drawing. I just got the color drawing from, but we got a 30 and a 50 on that side.
Okay. And I know that they've removed the oil change building from this request, but if we approve the request, I see that the building, the other building hasn't shifted to the middle of that space or anything. It looks like it's wide open for something new to go in there. If we approve this, would they then be able to go in with the second building without further approval?
This drawing does not show the second building. The other building says future development on that black and white, and actually is basically, as you can see where it's shifted from the Jiffy Lube or whatever that was in the prior drawing. You see the shaded building on the other one? That one does get closer to that setback, and what we'd be granting is that variance linear feet to both easements, so a future building could go up to that new variance setback number. At this
Okay.
point, it's not anticipated what that is, or what Mr. Greer indicated to me is he was closer on this building, maybe even had a contract. The other one was just kind of more thinking out loud, so I asked him to show me what we're gonna see if we build this tomorrow. Tell me what you need. If you're gonna build another building, it has to have a variance, make sure it's on the exhibit. And you can see it's shifted back out of what would be the one variance request, but it's still in the other one, it appears to on that drawing.
So approval of this would allow them to go in later and put in an oil change place or something else?
They'd have two options. They either have to stay in between those setbacks, or they would have the additional footage that you see on that shaded drawing. Do you see where it moves into the one setback proposed? They could do that or shift up and stay in between them, but they're not asking you for the additional setback for that building at this time. That's what they're locking down on their drawing. I think we would adhere to that future development footprint.
Would have a 25-foot setback.
I think if they're gonna submit that as their drawing and say that's where we might put something, I think we would say that's what you asked for, and if you were gonna shift out of that at all, I think they'd have to come back. The interesting second phase is if they're successful with the variance, they still have to get a site plan approval at the planning commission. So that's when we're gonna see really the nuts and bolts of what's going on the ground, and that gray shaded box for building 2, I think is locking them down for wherever they turn in the future to the planning commission. They may bring one building, then the second, they may bring them both in at one time, but that's step 2, and then there's even an additional step to get a zoning permit after that, so. I know I'm talking fast, that's just how I do it. If I need to repeat something, please let me know. Yes, sir.
Did I understand you say if we do grant this, that we should ask Morgan to make sure they have somebody in the plan?
Well, they've made that note, and that note says that they're gonna coordinate. I'll let the applicant tell you exactly how they anticipate how those conditions will work. They're offering those up as conditions. You guys know as the board, you guys can ask for conditions on a variance. You guys could ask for several things if you wanted. Those are the two notes that they've put forward as options, and I'll let them describe how they see those working. But one says they call them 15 days out, and they would work with them on any site prep, which again, I think is important, that when we're moving dirt around or busting up blacktop or repaving, that we're clearly, might be in that easement, but we're doing the best we can to, again, assure integrity of that infrastructure, which is the actual pipe. That's the worst case scenario, is a guy on a dozer nicks a gas pipe or a fiber line or a water line. That's really what the easement is doing, is making sure everyone understands we have something here, but we're gonna be on it as the gas company or as the construction crews moving forward, they're gonna be on it too. So that's their attempt to do that. Maybe that needs some wordsmithing, and our attorneys are looking at it. Their attorney's here, and of course you guys could say, I want the note to say whatever you want it to say.
We probably will have more questions maybe for you later.
I think Mr.
You have one
Miles-
now? Okay.
Any insight into why the easements for the two pipelines are different?
I personally, I do not. I went back and looked at plats. I just think it might have been historic. When one came through, we got 30. Maybe they were negotiated with each landowner back in the day. That's all they could get or were willing to buy. I have no idea. But easements evolve different ways. In modern times, again, you try to put them in your subdivision regulations as minimum standards. And as each plat comes through, you need 10 more foot of right of way, or you need 8 more foot for cable, or it's how we get them. Our subregs don't have that in it. Our zoning ordinance only has this, so my guess is it's just been historic, negotiated property by property or got by the gas company,
That is
parcel by
correct.
parcel. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate enough to have four across my property, and they're all four different, it's just how they were negotiated. Whatever they-
Any other questions right now for him?
That's a good question, thank you.
Like I said, we may have more later.
Thank you, guys.
Kevin, you're representing the applicant, am I correct?
Yes, I'm gonna have, John come up with me, you all have the, plats that have been passed
We will
out.
need to have him sworn.
Yes.
Yes. Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear and affirm the statement you're about to make are true and correct? And state your name. Okay, thank you.
Basically, we've gone through with Mr. Hunter, the gas company, spoken to your attorneys, and this is what we've come up with. I think we've covered what they wanted. Historically, as you said, and as you know, these were back in the 40s, and the reason one is 30 and one is 50 is that's what the gas company wanted at the time and was willing to pay for. And so that's why they're different widths. I will tell you that Jod has worked closely with Kinder Morgan. They are happy, as Mr. Hunter stated, they come up, buildings come up to their bought and paid for easement all the time. And this additional setback that was added into the ordinance for whatever reason, there's, as he said, there are no notes indicating why, creates a true hardship on us. I believe I've tendered some findings to you all that shows it takes this lot down to basically 0.32 acres of buildable area. I can tell you Kinder Morgan will be on the site anytime you're near their property. They were there when they rebuilt the road going to Junction. They were there on site and watched every shovel full of dirt going up when they went up the hill by KFC going toward Lowe's. So they're on site. They're very diligent, and they have a good safety record and are very proud of it. And we've bound ourselves by the notes and application notes, if you look up at the top, more or less the middle of things that Mr. Greer has bound himself to do for, to make sure it covers any concerns that the staff, the attorneys in Kinder Morgan had.
Questions for Kevin?
Is the owner locked into this position for his customer to bill for on this lot site that can't be turned or anything to eat up less of the 25?
Even if you turn the building, it's going to encroach into the
It
25.
will, I
Yes,
understand that.
yes, ma'am.
But you're up to 3 feet on one side. You're
On one side,
on
and
only one, yeah.
that's
And
correct.
that building is how wide and across the front there?
We have along the front, along the 50 feet easement line, which is the north side,
No, the building itself is how wide?
100
Across the front,
125 feet.
125 feet?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Total, but on the top is 70 feet, on the bottom is 75 feet on the top and 50 on the bottom. Just a little bit about the gas line. When I spoke to the gas company, the gas line is very deep, and with time they have been putting some fill on top of the gas line. So it is really much deeper than your typical gas line of 30 inches or 42 inches. As I believe it may be 7-8 feet. With time has been placed more fill on top of the gas line. And
When these were, when the bypass was put in the new road, these aren't 70-year-old pipes, just so anybody has that concern. These were all redone, and they will, in speaking with Kinder Morgan, I don't know if you remember them speaking about the intelligent pigs, they run through those. They can detect, and they run them through regularly, any change in the thickness, any outside
You might get
interference.
closer to the mic, that might have.
Any
trouble hearing.
outside interference, even if there's any additional outside pressure being put on the line.
Do you know when they were upgraded, the pipes?
I don't, but
I asked him the question, he said they just inspect this line and they believe it's like almost in a
No, I
great
don't mean the
condition.
inspection. You said there was new pipes. They had been changed.
I want to think it was when the bypass
When the
went
bypass went in,
yes.
okay.
And
That was my
That
understanding
would make
of it.
sense.
And the two condition, basically, we have two layer of condition we added voluntarily on ourselves, is that basically when we go through the final development plan, we send our drawings for the gas company, for them to comment and review, and then when this is passed through the final development plan and the planning commission approve it, we're going to, before starting construction, we're going to notify them by at least 2 weeks, tell them that day we're going to start the work, so they can be on site. So we add 2 layers of condition on top of what the city has.
Does anyone else have questions?
It looks like, you know, if a building with a footprint of the former restaurant, the King Buffet, were built about 20 feet north of the original, that it would all be inside the setback. Is there a reason why the building has to be in that particular shape and couldn't be more like the
old buffet?
footprint of the previous restaurant?
Yes, the reason, the old buffet, it's kind of encroaching into that easement, approximately 3,800 square feet, if you recall, based on our last presentation. Right now, our encroachment is like almost 57% less than what has been encroaching. So this layout will get you less encroachment into what's existing before.
But what I'm saying is, if a similar footprint were moved about 20 feet north, it would all be within the pink lines. But I'm guessing you're saying there's some pressing reason why you can't build it in that shape.
That's
Is that
correct.
true?
Yes, now I understand your
It's
question.
building for a customer. Are you not building for a customer?
That's
And
exactly
his
right.
res- that's
This is
his-
their footprint.
That's
They
his
have to
property.
have that one footprint.
Exactly right.
This is the, yeah, if he gets this customer, this is what he has to do.
That's correct. That's
And-
exactly,
and
this
it-
is coming
And it can't
from
be
them.
turned because of signage, is that right?
If it turns, still is going to encroach into the easement.
I know, but not as much, right?
Maybe more. I didn't do it, to be honest with you.
Shorter, maybe as much, but not as wide.
Yeah, I think you're
I
right.
don't think it was.
If you look at what we've submitted as the updated drawing, it does have in a lighter gray. It shows the pre-existing jumbo buffet building
No.
on it. Or King Buffet, whatever it was. Yes, sir.
Questions, yes, sir.
Start that.
Mr. Nesbitt, you
I
said
remember.
something about the depth or overfill. And someplace in the reading, I saw some comment about depth and overfill. Help me
Okay.
understand, is this going to get deeper, more shallow?
It's a great question. What we have submitted the first time, our exhibit, when we came to the technical review committee meeting, we have totally different layout. And the gas company was here and they said, we have some concern and some issue with your layout. And the two concern and the issue are the following. Number one, we don't want you to put any fill on our line. And number two, we would like to be on site when you guys do the work. We told them, second one, that's easy, we'll notify you ahead of time. And then we were planning, if you notice, still shown on our boss drawing, there's an area here, like kind of triangular shape. This is where we're planning to acquire some land from the transportation cabinet, access area, acquisition from the transportation cabinet to fill into that area. The gas company told us you cannot put no fill at all. So that's why, if you notice, we revised our layout of the parking, and you can see this island. You can see this island over here, how it's curved. And the reason it's curved that way is that we are using the existing asphalt on site right now. So we don't put any fill at all on top of the pavement. The only work is going to be on top of this easement is basically milling the asphalt 1.5 inches and putting a new coat of asphalt on top of it and stripe it. This is one side of your question. The second side, when I was having the conversation with them, I asked them how deep their line. I believe their line is very deep, and the reason is that with time, before the new company bought the previous gas company, the other company was more lenient about putting fill on top of the line. They are very stringent. No fill can be placed on that line, period. That's why we have to rework our layout and curve this area over there and use the existing pavement as is to kind of maintain the same elevation on the side.
The elevation will remain essentially
The same on the side. And that's what led to this layout configuration.
That-
We lost in that process close to 20 parking spaces. And actually, our client was talking to 2 potential tenants here. We could not meet the parking requirement for the second tenant, so we have to pull it out. And that's why the other configuration is just for the other layout, for the oil change, it was just configuration, and the reason it was there because they don't require parking. So we're looking for a tenant that does not require too much parking, so that whatever available parking can meet both requirements for the 2 tenants. Even though we meet the code requirement, but we don't meet the tenant requirement.
location of the tenant.
How many parking places are here?
I believe there was like 103 parking spaces,
How many?
103.
103.
That's in the lower right corner of the overhead view.
And what's
The-
required is 72
Oh,
parking spaces.
okay.
And so, another way of putting it is deeper is not always better as far as the gas company's concerned. They've got what they've got, and you add more on it, and that potentially could add more pressure to the line.
Mr. Halani, where you've noted application notes on the drawing, would you be amenable to changing that to say construction conditions?
Definitely.
So it's understood that it's binding?
Yes, no question.
Okay. Any other questions for them right now? May have more later.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here who would like to speak on this? Jerry? Raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm the statements you're about to make are true and correct?
I do.
And state your name.
Jerry Lieber.
Okay.
Thank you for allowing me this opportunity. I've come in on the tail end of this, but just as a citizen and looking at that, we've got 2 eyesores out there at that intersection. And as you well know, from the Cheddar's being built, what a quality appearance that came to be with the landscaping and so forth. And I feel that if this is not approved, it may lay there for years as another eyesore. And I'd hate to see us lose out on another business coming to Danville. And some of us on P&Z have had the reputation of being not business friendly, and I would want us to hopefully get over that reputation and become business friendly and do whatever we can to bring this business and or other businesses in to improve the city of Danville and make it more like we're all working for it to be. So I would just strongly encourage you to think about if this goes away, that may lay there for years and grow up and be who knows what. And if I think we have an excellent opportunity here to bring in a quality business that certainly will improve the standard of living in Danville and Boyle County. And I would just strongly encourage you to think about that. I know that I guess the main concern is just the construction of it. I know if a gas line erupts, whether you're 10 feet away or 100 feet away or 200 feet away, it's probably insignificant. But I know we drive over those gas lines every day. There's other buildings, I assume, built probably just as close and so forth. So I would just, as a citizen, encourage us to think about what we're doing here and why we would not allow something like that would be a strong benefit to our community. And I would strongly encourage us to look at bringing that here and providing the opportunity for our community to improve with a new restaurant and business there. Thank you.
Any questions for Jerry? Hang on a second. Okay. Anyone else? You can. Well, let me see if there's anyone else who wants to speak. Anyone else who would like to speak? Okay.
Just point out another ordinance issue that Mr. Anderson brought up, and one other interesting thing too, I think piggyback on Jerry's comments. When I met with Mr. Greer, I've dealt with a lot of developers in my history, and a lot of times developers tell you things and paint you a picture, but we don't always see that. The Cheddar's is an interesting example. He did that. He's built some stuff that I've dealt with him directly on, and he is a company that ends up painting a picture, and pretty much that's what we get. So that's a good thing in this situation when I met with him. But the Jiffy Lube was interesting to me, and this is my style. Maybe it's different, but we sat down, and when we met, I kind of was like, hey, I don't get it. And I see the Jiffy Lube, and I see what appears to be maybe a restaurant, and I just don't see how these things fit. And I think Jihad hit right on. They were looking for a potential second tenant to sort of tie the parking together, and they were looking for a low user based on parking. And I suggested, well, maybe there's an opportunity to share parking here, which is allowed. So if we could figure out, daytime use, nighttime use, we might have an opportunity to have a second client that sort of complements, in my opinion, what we see. Share parking, so we have less pavement. And so I appreciate that they sort of punted the Jiffy Lube and left the building footprint, and he just mentioned that the goal here then is to find another client that's a low parking user according to the zoning ordinance, so we could coordinate together. That just slid right through, but I think that's a huge win on this site. So we don't know what Plan B is, but Planning Commission will see it someday. But I appreciate the fact that the parking's been set to sort of coordinate that. I'll leave this site fairly green, and we got a really nice landscape start here. Number two, the signage is a concern for me. You see this cool little drawing here shows that nice little, shaded area. We're seeing the shadow of the sign. Sign needs to be addressed. It's kind of ugly and old and up there. It's kind of grandfathered in too. It's not really being addressed by the variance tonight, but it'll hit the Planning Commission when we look at the full site layout. We're going to ask them to do something that ties in with the whole overall concept here with the signage. Sure hate to have something this attractive and down the road we just use that old pole sign just like it is. And again, it's out there in a place that typically we wouldn't allow it of that style today. Third thing that Mr. Anderson brought up is this other building footprint. Our zoning ordinance also has a very dated standard on how we deal with nonconformities. This building was demoed, and without a doubt, if this variance wasn't approved, someone has the ability to go back on that exact footprint today. I think we all know that that is grandfathered in. That footprint is there for 12 months. So that's how our ordinance reads. So if we demo a building, I demo a building, or you guys, we can go back on that same footprint, even though we're 100% in that easement, sitting out in the right of way, whatever the facts would be. That's non-conforming standard, and that footprint is non-conforming for 12 months. That is a very odd standard to me too, because most places you see a dual way demo buildings. You have a voluntary or involuntary standard. So if that building's knocked over by wind, fire, act of God, whatever, you can go back for 12 months. A lot of towns have that 18 months, 2 years, or 6 months. Our standards is if you demo the building, you got 12 months to go back. And in this case, this was a voluntary demolition, and I would have thought that if you tore a building down that was sitting in an easement, sitting in the right of way, that you couldn't go back. But unfortunately, right now, you got 12 months to go back on that same exact footprint by right. So whatever would happen, that's an opportunity here, but I don't think, talking to Mr. Greer, that would ever be his desire or Plan B if this wasn't passed. I was just letting you know that our non-conforming standard for footprints, demolition, I think should be looked at in a more modern fashion with this voluntary, involuntary, because that would be the worst case scenario, in my opinion, from site planning is if down the road we go right back on that footprint, which is closer and actually in that easement. So that's something we may look at as a planning commission in the future, of how we look at non-conforming. And then the general rule of thumb that planners look at is when we have something that non-conforming, when we're getting less non-conforming, it's always a good thing. So I appreciate that they've at least tried to shift the building, and Mr. Greer indicated to me this was very specific to a client, and a look, and a frontage, and a style of building. And or he would easily shift it around, but this is where the client has to be. So just throwing those out there, and be glad to answer any questions you guys might have on that.
Any questions from anyone else?
No, I have a comment. I would like to indicate appreciation to those who have paid attention to the landscaping of this property. I think that that is also important in attracting business and being a business-friendly community. I would remind you all that that's a primary entry into our community, very heavily traveled. It's on the same road as two motels, a new restaurant, and again, I have a great deal of concern about how that corner is going to look. So I'm glad that attention has been given to this. One other thing I would like to add to that, I would hope that maybe we could have some sort of signage there or something like we have on our other entryways into the community that welcome people to the community and enhance the friendliness of our area. So thank you to that, giving that attention to that issue.
And I had a comment that all buildings aren't equal. If there is a proposal, we might want to consider requiring approval for the second one separately, because if it's a gas station or an oil change or something that has a lot of deep digging underneath, that would be a risk in ways that something that's just above the surface wouldn't be.
Wouldn't that be only if they encroached into the setback, am I right? Kevin?
I'll let him explain, John explain about the oil change, if that were to pass. But it's my understanding that the one thing, any digging that would be done wouldn't even be inside that 25, extra
Be outside.
25 foot.
That automatically, if it were going, even if we approved variance on this setback for the one building, automatically you would have to get approval for the second one?
No, this would approve, what we're asking is approval of the easement along the whole property line, but I can tell you that if you got anywhere near, if you wanted to dig anything along Kinder Morgan's line inside that easement, that would not happen. That's why, as Jihad explained earlier, they're not even going to be digging up the pavement. They're going to be just milling off and redoing that. You don't dig on their easement.
But you could dig on the setback unless we put in a provision.
On the 25 feet setback,
Yeah,
right now on the 25 feet setback, if you look at the buildings that is shown right now on the drawing, we have to dig for foundation. It's
right.
outside the easement, and the foundation are like, you have to be below frost line for 24 inches and then additional 12 inches for.
But what I'm saying is, if we approve this, we might want to put in a provision that if they're going to go into the setback for a second building, that might be a gas station with deep, big tanks. If they're going to go into setback for that, they would need our approval.
Well, it could be for any building,
Anything.
that we would need to look at what was being built and how.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm saying. We could say we approve this,
This
but
building
not
only, this
the
building
second
only.
one. Yeah.
This drawing, for the oil change that you
Previously.
propose, or think that you propose, it isn't in the 20.
I can
It
move
is.
it, but
Yes, it
it
is a
is
little
right
There's some
now.
parking,
Now, look.
is the point.
that's the.
It is, but
Oh, that? Oh, no, that's not the oil, that's the Dairy Queen. The oil change would go here.
But to answer your question, Mr. Green, I can pull the building out. I have enough room to pull it out. I was trying to put them so that the face of the building lined up, but I have room to pull it back if I need to.
And I'd like to point out that, once again, that if you, this body approves the variance, then it still goes to planning and zoning to the commission for site plan approval. So, you're the first step, you're far from the last, and then site plan, and you still gotta get a building permit.
They're having trouble hearing, Kevin.
Okay, I'm sorry, we'll try and, this is just the first step. If you approve the variance, then you still have, site plan approval still goes before planning and zoning. And then they're still dealing with the, getting the permit itself, a building permit from the planning and zoning office.
We have a condition on it too. So, Mr. Anderson, I think what you're saying, I think the best way these things work together is you guys set conditions of whatever style. Planning Commission is the next step. It's going to see a full set of engineered drawings for whatever site. And we could break that into 2 site plan approvals. I mean, obviously, they've only got one client, they're gonna come in and build something, and they could come in on the second one. And if that happens to be the uses you described, we could do something different at the site plan approval. If tomorrow it was a, you know, AT&T store or a bank or something, I think what you're describing are underground tanks or any excavation that would be unusual, that we should look at that on a different level. I would agree, and I would think that site plan approval, we might dash a wider construction easement, and we're probably gonna want them to show that, even though they've made these conditions here, I think when we get to the site plan, we're gonna wanna see something graphically that shows these specific areas on what the planning commission's gonna see. And that's gonna basically be a set of construction drawings. But what you're describing, if there are additional uses of that nature, they should do possibly something different. And I guess you guys could make that a note that those uses then would do something different in our place when we hit the planning commission. I'm not sure how we'd word that right now, but that makes sense.
Couldn't we just approve this building and not a second building? And so if they came in with a second building, we'd have to see it again.
It's hard to do.
If it's a gas station, we might say no, whereas with a bank, we might say
Yeah,
yes.
what you're doing is approving the variance foot. So if they come in and build 3 buildings, you've given them the ability to have that setback into this linear feet. To say building 1 gets it, but building 2 doesn't, I don't know how we could do that. But what you could restrict in the note to the second building, I don't know what application they're asking you for a variance on the entire site of that linear feet into that 25 foot. So if they came in with building 2, 3, 4, if it was possible, you've given them the authority to go that far.
So Bruce, can we approve it for 1 building?
Yes.
Okay.
That may be a little unusual in Steve's experience, but yes, you can impose conditions, and that
And
could
those
be a
conditions
condition.
could include for
I
one
mean,
building.
basically, you'd be granting the variance, you know, for this building alone and no others.
Just for the setback for this portion of, that's needed for this one building, yes.
Can it be phrased, Bruce, I'm sorry, in a way that any additional building has to be, in case encroach into the 25 feet setback, has to be, come back in front of the Board of Adjustment?
Yes, that's,
Okay.
I think that was the intention.
Yeah.
Yes, and that was my understanding of what,
All right.
Does that satisfy your concern? Any other construction other than as shown on
For
this
that concern.
application?
That's not hindering you any. That's not hindering.
This building, no, it wouldn't affect this
No,
building at all.
no, it would be in any other structures, something like that language, any other structures other than is shown would be subject to review by the Board of
Any other
Adjustment.
questions or comments?
Can I throw a couple things out? First of all, I appreciate your comment. You need to know Mr. Greer was the one that developed the cheddars out there. I think we all agree that that's a nice look. His clients, he gets nice clients who like a nice look. I think you'll be pleased with how this will turn out. And it is a highly visible corner, and it is truly an eyesore right now, and it was for 20 years.
Any other questions or comments? Jesse?
There has been several mentions of that pipeline and it being new or whatever replaced. Can you guarantee that it won't go off?
Nobody.
No one can guarantee that. That's the Kinder Morgan, they were tried, that discussion was had earlier. You can't, there are no guarantees in this life, or very few. And
Yeah, there's no way.
they have, let me tell you what, they are very proactive, much more so than Texas Eastern was. And as I said, they run those pigs through there, and they've done it recently, and they can tell if there's even any additional pressure on the pipe, and certainly if there's any change in the thickness or any weakness in the structure in any way whatsoever. They do all they can. They don't want it, anything to happen to their pipeline any more than we do.
I've seen them run a pig through and it goes set it off too, but that doesn't happen often. My point simply is, when you build a structure like this with a high rate of of traffic over that line, which is what you're doing there, you are stressing that line. And any way you look at it, you're putting more stress on that line.
Well, if you look at where, what's right beside this lot, you'll see that it's on US 127, and those same lines run right under 127. And I don't know what the traffic count is there, but there's a many thousand time difference as far as daily traffic count. And larger vehicles, if you will. I know I've seen oversized, overweight loads running up down that road all the time.
Anyone else? Any comments, questions? Yes, sir. Oh, you're an attorney. Yeah, aren't you an attorney?
Yeah, and I'm not here as an official attorney.
Well, you're still.
I'm just
I think
here
you're
as
still-
a,
I think
as an
you're still-
interested citizen.
I think you're still covered.
Thank you. Well, I'm Mark Morgan, and I'm here as an interested citizen, and I've been listening to this very carefully because I remember when one of the pipelines did fail just across the Dix River, and we were living in Forkland and still were aware of that even out in Forkland. So the magnitude of an impact could be great. And I just want to thank this body for being so careful and so deliberative when you are modifying a setback or granting an exception to a setback. I think you're to be congratulated, and drilling down as deeply as you are on the particulars, including any future buildings. So I just want to thank you for your service.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments?
I'll make a comment. I struggle with the 25-foot setback that Danville has. I don't understand I don't know that we've understood what it was implemented for. And then again, we do have the 12-month rebuild in there, so that's been a struggle for me, but
I think for all of us.
I like the progress that we're seeing, and I agree that we need something there that makes Danville
Look good.
good, because we are.
Okay, any other comments or questions? If not, does someone have a motion that we accept or deny? You make a motion for, that we accept based on the findings of fact? Are there any other conditions that you would like to add? David?
Do we want to add that we approve it for one building outside of the, or inside the setback, and so that additional buildings that violate the setback would need separate approval?
I'm sure that Henry could write that in for us.
If that's what the
If that's what,
movement would
is
like
that
to do.
okay with you? Okay.
So
I would
we're
also
saying-
suggest that you add in that bit about the application notes being listed on the
Right.
plat as conditions.
Right. And is there any other conditions that anyone wanted to add?
About this future, well, that would take in for the future
Right,
buildings,
right.
period.
So
Okay.
any other
Okay.
additions or comments that we need to add to this?
Madam Chair, if I could just reiterate, what we're saying is adopting findings as submitted by the applicant with the addition of the two
Right.
conditions noted. Okay.
Right.
All right,
And the change in the plat heading,
correct. That, yeah.
we'll change that.
That is a condition, and then the other condition being reappearance before the Board of Adjustment for any
Any
Future
further
buildings.
structure- Any additional structures require consideration by the
Right.
board,
Right,
consideration and approval.
right.
Okay.
Okay. And you can take care of that for us. Anything else? Okay, if not, let's have a vote. All in favor of approval? Any opposition? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just want to thank Steve for all his help. I mean, he was a great help for us during that process. Appreciate it.
And do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?